The bell above the cafe door jingled, though not sharply enough to startle anyone. I sat at my usual table near the window, knees pressed against the edge, laptop open but cursor blinking like it had nothing better to do than watch me fumble with words I didn't have. Outside, the drizzle turned the street gray, and for some reason, I liked it that way, like the world had muted itself just enough for me to breathe. She was behind the counter, as usual, her hands moving with the ease of someone who had done this 100 times before. I noticed the way she tied her hair back, a few silver strands stubbornly loose, and how her fingers lingered on the handle of the espresso machine as if saying a quiet hello. She looked up, caught my eyes, and for a fraction of a second, I felt like maybe the world had paused. "Hey, the usual?" she asked. I nodded, though my mind had been elsewhere, replaying the same line I'd almost texted my friend 3 times that week. I didn't send it. I rarely sent anything these days. "Extra foam?" she added, flicking her wrist, waiting. "Yeah, thanks." I realized I was watching her hands more than her face, the way she moved the milk pitcher just so, the careful tilt of her wrist. There was nothing flashy about it, but it was hypnotic. Ordinary, but it drew me in. She carried the cup to my table herself, sliding it over with a small smile. "Forgot your stir stick last time. Here you go." I smiled back, a little stiffly. "Thanks. You remembered." She shrugged, brushing her fingers along the edge of the cup. "I noticed things." Her eyes met mine for a beat longer than necessary. I looked down at the foam, pretending to stir, but my fingers fidgeted against the handle of the mug anyway. We didn't talk much after that. She had other customers, and I had other things I was pretending to do on my laptop. But every now and then, I'd catch her glance out of the corner of my eye, the smallest acknowledgement, like a quiet heartbeat passing between us. I noticed everything, the small crease in her sweater, the way her earrings caught the light, the little hum she made when she was alone with the espresso machine. I always told myself it was nothing. Just admiration, a fleeting distraction. But in the moments when the cafe emptied, when she refilled my cup without me asking, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Not excitement, exactly. Not hope. Just the subtle, almost painful awareness that someone else's presence could feel like home. She paused by my table once, fingers brushing against mine as she handed over the cup. My hand froze. She didn't pull away. I didn't either. Time thinned, and I couldn't think past the warmth of her touch. Everything else, the blinking cursor, the gray drizzle, my half-written emails, slipped out of focus. See you tomorrow?" I found myself saying, more out of instinct than courage. She nodded, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "If you want." I wanted. I didn't know how much I wanted, but it was enough to make the space between us feel like a universe. Later, as I walked home, I checked my phone. No messages. No missed calls. Nothing. I paused, thumb hovering over the screen, thinking maybe I'd text her first. I didn't. But then, as I unlocked my door, a single message lit up. "Can you come by after your shift? I have something to show you." I stared at it, chest tightening in a way that made every small habit, every unsent text, every paused thought, feel suddenly irrelevant. And for the first time all week, I didn't hesitate. I followed her up the narrow stairwell, my shoes squeaking against the worn wood. She unlocked her apartment door without a word, letting me step inside first. The space smelled faintly of tea and old books, warm and unassuming, the kind of place where people could live quietly without asking for notice. She gestured toward the small kitchen table. "Sit. I'll make us some tea." I watched her move around the kitchen, the way her fingers brushed the rim of a mug, how she measured the leaves with a kind of precision that suggested habit more than thought. I felt strangely self-conscious, like a guest in someone's memory rather than a visitor in the present. "You always drink green tea?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She shrugged, smiling softly. "It's the only thing I never seem to forget." She poured the water carefully, hands trembling just a fraction, and set a cup in front of me. "I used to drink this with my daughter." She loved adding honey. I nodded, not sure what to say. Her words were gentle, but there was a pause after them, like she'd placed a small piece of herself on the table and wasn't certain I'd notice. I sipped, noticing how the steam curled around her face. She leaned back slightly, letting her eyes linger on mine longer than was necessary, and for a moment, the room felt smaller, more intimate than it had any right to. You ever feel like someone's watching all the choices you make? She asked, almost to herself. I considered it. Sometimes. Not in a scary way. More like you're standing outside yourself, trying to see what matters. Her laugh was quiet, self-deprecating. Exactly that. I divorced a few years ago, felt like my life had become someone else's story I didn't get to edit. She paused, fingers brushing the table absent-mindedly. I'm used to people leaving, I guess. Or leaving me wondering if they ever noticed I was here at all. I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. I imagined the small apartment, the quiet, the light through the curtains, and somehow the thought of her alone, trying not to vanish from her own life, hit me harder than I expected. We drank in silence for a while, the ticking clock louder than it should have been. I found myself noticing little things, how her ring caught the afternoon sun, how her shoulders relaxed and tensed like a subtle rhythm I could never name. When I stood to leave, she didn't immediately move to open the door. Instead, she reached out, lightly touching the back of my hand. I froze, and she held it there for a heartbeat longer than polite, just enough to make the space between us feel like something fragile and important. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. I thought later, as I walked home. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. The air outside was cool, damp from the rain that had stopped, and I realized I wanted to see her again, to step into that quiet, suspended space where everything else, rules, doubts, age, past lives, could wait. I didn't mean to stay late at the cafe that evening, but the rain had turned everything slow and sticky, and I found myself staring out the window more than making coffee. Then my phone buzzed. A message from her. I'm home. Come by if you want. I paused, thumb hovering over the screen. The idea of going felt both inevitable and reckless. When I arrived, she opened the door almost immediately. The apartment smelled faintly of baking bread, cinnamon, something comforting that made the world outside, the emails, the street, my own small, quiet anxieties, seem distant. Hi, I said, words small, uneven. Hi. She stepped aside, letting me in, but the space between us felt larger than the hallway. I could feel her hesitation. Or maybe it was mine. She motioned to the couch. Sit. I did. She moved across the room, fiddling with the tea kettle like she needed to keep busy. I watched her, noticing how her shoulders tightened each time I glanced up, how her hands lingered on the counter edge, unsure. You're late, she said finally, almost as if testing me. Yeah, I murmured, shrugging. My voice sounded small in the apartment. Traffic. Rain. We talked, lightly, awkwardly, words bouncing off the walls. I wanted to reach for her hand again, like before, but the thought of doing it, really doing it, made something coil in my chest. I imagined consequences, imagined her pulling away, imagined someone, her daughter, a neighbor, a friend, walking in at the wrong moment. She brought over 2 cups of tea, setting them down in a way that seemed casual but felt deliberate. I noticed how she lingered, fingers brushing the rim of the cup, just slightly longer than necessary. I could almost read the hesitation in her movements, the quiet weighing of what she wanted versus what she allowed herself. For a few minutes, we drank in silence. I couldn't stop thinking about the warmth of her hand, the way her eyes held mine too long, the tiny tremor in her fingers when she adjusted the sleeve of her cardigan. Then she laughed softly, nervously, and I leaned in, just slightly, caught in the impulse to bridge the space. She looked at me, really looked, and froze. I saw the subtle shift, the tilt of her head, the tiny step backward, the way her lips parted without a word. I didn't pull back immediately. Neither did she. The air between us became taut, loaded with the things we wouldn't say. My heart thumped, my fingers curled slightly on the edge of the couch, and I thought, maybe, just maybe. But then a soft knock at the door startled both of us. She tensed, glanced toward the sound, and the moment fractured like thin glass. I pulled back a fraction, unsure what I had been chasing or what she had almost let me have. We both laughed quietly, awkwardly, but the tension didn't fade. Not entirely. As I left later, the echo of her nearly touching, nearly saying, nearly, everything followed me home. The rain had stopped, but the space between the world I knew and the world I wanted remained. I found her at the little park near her apartment, sitting on the same bench where she always paused after her walks. The afternoon was soft, gray, the kind of light that made everything feel suspended. I hesitated before sitting down beside her, aware of the small distance, the air heavy with things neither of us had named. "You came," she said quietly, almost like a question. Yeah?" My hands fiddled with the strap of my bag. I didn't meet her eyes immediately. "Thought you might need company." She gave a small laugh, the kind that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Or maybe you needed an excuse." I felt my chest tighten. "Maybe both." We sat for a while, not talking, watching the leaves drift down. Her fingers tapped lightly against the bench, a quiet rhythm that somehow echoed my own restlessness. I wanted to reach for her hand, wanted to bridge the space between us, but the words lodged in my throat. Finally, she exhaled sharply. "I don't know why I let you get so close," she admitted, voice low, almost trembling. "I've been careful. I shouldn't feel this." I turned toward her, heart thudding, trying to read what she meant. I know," she cut in, a bitter edge under the quiet. "I know the difference. The years. My divorce. Everything. And still, you're here." Her fingers twitched, brushing against the bench between us. "And I don't want to pull away because it would hurt. And I don't want to stay because it might be wrong." I swallowed, hands clenching in my lap. "I don't care about wrong," I said softly, almost too quietly. "I care about you." Her gaze dropped to the ground, catching a leaf in the corner of her shoe. "You shouldn't. Not like this. You have a life, friends, a future I can't promise." And there it was, the weight of it all, pressing into my chest. I imagined every consequence, every whispered caution. But I also imagined her fingers brushing mine, the faint warmth of her shoulder against mine, the possibility of something real, something ours, if we just. She looked up suddenly, eyes glimmering, a tremor in her lips. "Do you even know what you want?" she asked softly, almost a whisper. "Or are you just here?" I hesitated. I wanted to tell her everything, wanted to erase the distance with words I'd been holding back for weeks. But the right words wouldn't come. I only knew I was afraid to ruin her, afraid to lose her, afraid of the quiet tension that made my chest ache. Her hand brushed mine again, almost by accident, and the world narrowed to that small, electric connection. My fingers twitched, hovering above hers, caught between restraint and impulse. And then she looked away, voice quieter now, almost swallowed by the gray light. "Are you going to stay, or walk away?" I didn't answer. I didn't move. The question hung there, unanswered, and the bench between us felt impossibly small, the air thick with everything we hadn't said. The next morning, I walked past her apartment on my way to the cafe, hoping for a quick hello. The door was shut. Not locked, just shut. I waited a moment, half expecting her to appear, waving me in with that small, unguarded smile. But she didn't. I tried calling. No answer. I sent a text. Nothing. I imagined she'd done something mundane, showered, gone out for errands, but my chest tightened at the absence, at the gap where her presence should have been. Later, I saw her from across the street, walking quickly, coat pulled tight, eyes forward. She didn't notice me, didn't look my way, didn't wave. I debated calling again, but I held the phone in my hand, thumb hovering. The words evaporated before I could send them. I started to replay everything we'd shared, the bench, the near confession, the touch of her fingers, and tried to locate the moment when it had all slipped, but I couldn't. It was like grasping at smoke. A day passed. Then another. She didn't return my messages, and when I came by the cafe, she was polite, careful, a different version of herself. Smiles were smaller, gestures contained. I felt like I was intruding on someone else's life, someone I wasn't allowed to know. I caught a glimpse of her phone left on the counter once, a notification blinking briefly, a name I didn't recognize. I didn't ask, but it planted a seed of doubt, a silent question I couldn't shake. Was she seeing someone else? Or someone from her past, an echo I hadn't considered? I tried to focus on other things, my work, the street outside, my half-read books, but my mind kept looping back to her. The spaces we had shared now felt heavier, haunted by the weight of absence. I imagined scenarios endlessly. Maybe she was angry, maybe she was scared, maybe she regretted letting me come close. Or maybe she was just gone. Not in the dramatic, tragic way, just paused. Like life had put our story on hold without telling me. I found myself holding my phone at odd hours, drafting messages I couldn't send. I want to see you. Did I do something wrong? I keep thinking about that bench. Every sentence felt inadequate, and I deleted them all. That evening, I walked past her apartment again. The light in her window was soft, golden, the same that had once made everything feel intimate and suspended. I thought of knocking, of stepping inside and demanding clarity. But I didn't. My hand hovered over the doorknob and then fell. I left, footsteps quiet, stomach hollow. The door remained closed, her absence loud. The bench felt emptier than ever, the park lonelier. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence that I found her on the balcony of her apartment, the evening stretching quiet and still. The city beyond was a blur of lights, cars humming in the distance, but up here it was calm, suspended, like the world had given us this small bubble. She was leaning against the railing, hands wrapped around a mug of tea, shoulders slightly hunched. I paused at the doorway, unsure if I should step closer or retreat, the weight of the last few days pressing on me. "Hey," I said softly. She didn't turn immediately, just tilted her head toward me. "Hey." The word was small, careful. I crossed the balcony slowly, hands stuffed in my pockets. I missed this," I admitted, the words barely above a whisper. "Missed seeing you." She sipped her tea, fingers brushing the rim, eyes flicking to mine, then away again. "I didn't want to mess things up," she said. Her voice trembled slightly. "I thought maybe keeping distance was safer." I shook my head, hands tightening on the balcony rail. "Safer for who?" "You." "Me?" She looked at me finally, really looked, and I felt the old hesitation, the walls start to soften. I didn't know how to handle it. How to handle you. Or me. I took a careful step closer. "I don't want easy. I just want honest." She laughed, quietly, almost a sigh. "Honest is scary." "I know." I reached out slowly, thumb brushing the back of her hand. She didn't pull away. My fingers lingered, resting lightly, tentative. The small touch held 1,000 words either of us could say. We stayed like that for a long moment, silence wrapping around us. I noticed the subtle tremor in her wrist, the way her hair caught the fading light, the faint scent of tea, and something familiar that always reminded me of home. "I'm tired of pretending," I said softly, my voice raw. "Tired of holding back." She nodded, shoulders relaxing fractionally. "Me too." Her hand shifted, pressing lightly against mine. "I'm scared, though. Scared of what it means if we actually try." "Then we just try," I whispered. Not grand, not dramatic. Just enough to say I was here, I was willing. Her lips twitched into a small, uncertain smile. "Okay," she murmured. And that was it. A single word, simple, human, carrying more weight than anything we'd said before. Our hands remained touching, neither bold nor rushed, just present. The balcony, the city, the fading light, they all felt quieter now, as if the world had stepped back to let this small truth exist. I didn't need more. No declarations, no promises. Just her hand in mine. Just her allowing me in, and me, finally, letting myself stay. For the first time in a long time, everything else could wait. The cafe smelled of early morning coffee, faintly bitter, faintly familiar. I was sitting at our usual table, the one by the window where light slanted just right, and she slid in across from me without a word. "Black coffee?" I asked, half teasing, half hopeful. "Always," she said, curling her hands around the mug, eyes flicking to mine with that quiet acknowledgement we no longer needed to speak aloud. We didn't talk much at first, just sipped, just existed in that shared rhythm. Outside, the street was waking slowly, footsteps scattered, the distant hum of traffic filling the pauses. Later, we went for a walk along the park path, the same one where the bench had witnessed so many near confessions, near moments of everything we hadn't said. I noticed how she adjusted her scarf just so, and how the corner of her mouth twitched with a half-smile at something private only we would understand. We paused at the bench. I didn't sit, she did, the morning light catching her hair. I leaned against the railing nearby. We didn't need words. I reached over, brushing her hand lightly, just as I had months ago, and it felt steady, real, earned. "I like this," she said after a moment. "Our mornings. Slow." "Me too," I replied. I watched a leaf drift to the ground, thought about the days we'd spent in silence, the gaps that had once felt so impossibly large. Time passed. Rain came, rain went. We drank tea at her kitchen table, sometimes clumsy, sometimes quiet, our hands occasionally brushing, always lingering just a fraction too long. We learned each other's routines, the hum of the kettle, the exact moment her daughter called on weekends, the little sighs she made when reading a book she loved. I'd bring her coffee just the way she liked it, black and steady, and she'd remember the way I took mine, extra cream, little sugar. Small things, but the world felt larger for them, gentler. Evenings were soft, the kind where the city faded behind the hum of conversation, or the absence of it. She laughed more now, the laughter lighter, and I realized how much of myself I had been holding back before, how much I had learned to just be. One morning, she looked at her watch, 8:47 a.m. She smiled at the coincidence. "Same time as our first accidental meet?" "Exactly," I said. "Same and yet different." She didn't answer, just reached for my hand. Fingers interlaced, thumb brushing. Quiet. Ordinary. Perfect in a way that needed no adjectives. And I thought, finally, about the pause, the gaps, the hesitation, and how all of it had led here. Not to fireworks or declarations, just this, two people learning to exist in the same space without fear, without pretense, quietly together. I sipped my coffee, warm and bitter, and knew we had found our rhythm. Nothing perfect. Everything real. Did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next?